March 2nd, 1945, Stendal Airfield, northern Germany. The dawn comes grey and metallic, heavy with mist and engine oil. Across the cracked concrete apron, the last of Luftwaffe bombers stand like wounded giants, scarred, patched and trembling under the weight of their own fuel hunger. The Heinkel, a 177, Greiftail code, A6 crouches beneath the low clouds, its four-coupled Daimler-Benz engines coughing blue smoke into the cold morning air. Inside the draughty hangar, Unteroffizier Karl Heinemann kneels beside the rear turret. He's 23, though the lines on his face suggest 40. Once a steel worker from Dresden, now the last surviving gunner of his original crew. The others, Schulze, Becker and Meissner, are gone, their names crossed out in the flight log with thin red lines. The war has reduced the Luftwaffe to desperate improvisation. Aviation fuel is rationed rubber stripped from civilian cars and spare parts scavenged from wrecks. Yet today, Hauptmann Gerhard Voss insists on one last strike toward the Rhine to slow the Allied advance. He says though everyone knows it won't matter. Karl's hands move quickly over the twin MG 101s. Each feeds from a belt of 30mm rounds, barely 500 per gun. Against the P-51 Mustangs waiting beyond the clouds, it's a cruel joke. He checks the heating coils again. The thin wires glow weakly, barely enough to keep frost from sealing the gun solid. But there's something new inside his turret. Bolted behind the armour plate and half concealed beneath a ragged maintenance cover sits a cluster of mirrors and a salvaged Revy C-12D reflector sight, the kind used by FW-190 fighters. Its lens projects a glowing amber reticle powered by a salvaged battery from a crashed Ju-88. Karl calls it the Spiegel system, the mirror system. 2 canteen mirrors fixed at shallow angles aligned to widen his field of view, feeding the light of the outside world into his sight picture. It's crude, hand-filed, and illegal, but it works. The chief mechanic Oberfeldwebel Kruger had threatened him just days before. Unauthorized alteration of weapons is a court-martial offence, Heinemann. Karl had simply replied, "Then you can court-martial my coffin." Voss, overhearing, said nothing. Later that night the pilot helped him bolt the mirrors into place. The crew understood any edge might keep them alive one more sortie. As the engines howl to life, Karl squeezes into his glass cocoon at the tail. The intercom crackles. "Crew ready, ready," Karl answers. The Heinkel lurches forward. Through the frost-veiled plexiglass the runway stretches like a road to oblivion. The bomber gathers speed engines vibrating through its long fuselage and then weightlessness. Stendal falls away beneath them, the last fragments of a dying Reich, shrinking to grey fields and abandoned villages. The mission strike Allied bridgeheads near Wesel, where American armour is massing for the final push into Germany. But no one expects to make it back. At 10,000 feet, condensation blooms across the turret glass. Karl wipes it with a rag, watching the world fade into a silver void. The Greif climbs sluggishly, fuel sloshing in its nearly empty tanks. Each minute higher feels like a defiance of gravity itself. At 24,000 feet the clouds break. The Rhine glitters far below a thin scar winding through the haze. The intercom hisses again, Voss's voice tight and alert. "Keep eyes open." Mustangs reported in Sector Charlie 2. Karl leans into his scope. Through the mirror array the tail world is alive. An entire hemisphere of sky now visible instead of a narrow slit. The reticle floats in the centre like a ghostly compass. Minutes pass, then out of the sun's glare silver flashes. 6 dots descending fast, fanning into attack formation. "Fighters 5 o'clock high," he shouts. The dorsal gunner opens fire first, his tracers slicing across the void. The Heinkel shudders as 50 caliber rounds stitch the tail cone. Karl's mirrors catch a flash of movement, a Mustang rolling inverted diving straight toward him. He aligns the reticle calm, almost detached. The Spiegel system glows steady. He can see the pilot's canopy sparkle like a mirror itself. He presses both triggers. Twin streams of orange tracers arc outward, 30 rounds, then 40. The Mustang bursts into smoke, its wing tearing free as it spirals earthward. Another comes in from 7 o'clock low. Karl swivels, corrects fires. His tracers converge perfectly, sparks leap from the Mustang's fuselage before it banks away trailing flame. Inside the intercom someone shouts, "Tailgun's got one, Heinemann got one." The crew cheers. Karl exhales. His mirrors tremble from recoil but hold. The sky clears, the attack broken. By the time the Heinkel turns for home, half its control surfaces are shredded, one engine gone, and the radio silent. But they make it limping back to Stendal through dusk like a wounded bird. On the ground, Voss orders the gun camera film developed immediately. Hours later, under the flickering light of a projector, they watch the truth flicker across the wall. 2 kills, 1 probable. The Hauptmann lowers his cigarette and turns to Karl. "How did you see him?" Coming from behind the cloud, Karl simply points to the mirrors bolted beside his seat. Voss stares at them, says nothing, then whispers half to himself, "Maybe we've been looking the wrong way all along." March 3rd, 1945. Stendal Airfield. Morning frost hangs on the twisted barbed wire that rings the perimeter. The hangars are half empty now. Most of the Heinkels never came back. Out on the frozen tarmac, Karl Heinemann stands beside his turret, watching Hauptmann Voss argue with the base armourer. The projector film from the night before has spread like wildfire. Officers, technicians, even ground crew crowd around the flickering images of the P-51 falling in flames. No one can quite believe what they're seeing. The camera timestamps and damage patterns confirm it. The kill is real, and the gunner who scored it did so with a forbidden device. "Unauthorized modifications, that's what this is," shouts Oberfeldwebel Kruger, face red with outrage. "If the inspectorate sees this, we're finished." "We're finished anyway," Voss snaps back, "unless we learn from it." The debate draws an audience. Word spreads through the dispersal huts. Ein Spiegel, in der Kanzel, a mirror in the turret, mechanics gather to stare at Karl's contraption. A patchwork of metal strips, bolts and wiring gleams under the pale light. Someone whistles softly. Karl stays quiet. His gloves are still black with gun oil, his eyes hollow from sleeplessness. He knows how absurd it must look, a soldier's improvisation in the dying hours of the Reich. But inside he feels something close to pride. For the first time in months his work mattered. Voss orders the Spiegel system documented. A photographer from the Waffenamt records close-ups, mirror angles, reflector, placement, wiring, schematic. Heinemann's name is scribbled at the bottom of the report with a single word beside it. Unzulässig, unauthorized. Still, the test flights begin that afternoon. Mechanics scavenge mirrors from wrecked aircraft and even mess hall washrooms. Within hours, 3 other Henkels carry rough copies of Karl's design. March 6th, 1945, over the Harz Mountains. The 6th Staffel of Kampfgeschwader 100 climbs into a pale blue sky streaked with contrails. Among them Voss's bomber Heinemann, at the tail his mirror system secured with new bolts and sealed glass. Fuel is scarce. Each sortie is flown with calculated economy. The Grief drones along at 300 km/h, its shadow rippling over the snowfields below. Suddenly, radio chatter explodes. Bandits. 12 o'clock high, P-51s. Again this time from the 364th Fighter Group out of Honington. Their polished aluminum fuselages glint like knives in sunlight. They dive in pairs, guns flashing. But this time, the Germans are ready. Karl's mirrors catch their approach from far off, a tiny glint above the clouds. He shouts warnings through the intercom, giving bearings before the first tracers even appear. The dorsal gunner pivots early, adjusting his fire. The first Mustang peels off, startled by the accuracy. A second dives low, trying to slip beneath the Heinkel's belly. Karl tracks him through the Spiegel system, leads the reticle ahead of the glinting spinner, and fires short, controlled bursts. The Mustang's left wing erupts in sparks. It veers, trailing smoke, and disappears into the haze. 2 minutes later, the bombers break formation, but they're still airborne, still fighting. By the time they turn for home, only 1 Heinkel is lost. Normally half the formation would never return. At Stendal, mechanics run to meet them, shouting questions before the engines even stop turning. Did it work? How many Voss steps down from the ladder, eyes bright for the first time in weeks. It worked, he says simply. Get me more mirrors. By nightfall, word reaches the base commander. A field conference is called in the drafty operations hut. Maps hang limp on the walls. The air smells of damp wool and gasoline. Officers from nearby units attend, among them a liaison from the Luftwaffe's Technisches Amt. Voss presents the gun camera footage projecting the glowing streaks of tracer fire intersecting perfectly across the Mustang's silhouettes. Silence fills the room. This can't be coincidence, says one officer. It's geometry, Voss replies. Heinemann made the tail gunner's blind spot vanish. The liaison officer frowns, scribbling notes. There's no way to standardize such a device, he says. We have neither the materials nor the manpower. We don't need a factory Voss counters. We need 20 mechanics with mirrors and glue. The room murmurs. They all know the truth. The war is lost, the Reich collapsing. But still, every man wants to live through the next mission. Before dawn, orders go out across the sector. Any surviving Heinkel or Ju-88 may replicate Voss-Heinemann rear sight assembly using local resources. March 17th, 1945. Night raid over Kassel. 20 bombers lift into a bruised sky, their navigation lights dark. Each carries the improvised mirror reflector sight bolted to its tail. Allied radar stations register them too late. The bomb run scatters, but lands true. Of the 20 that take off, 16 return. In March, that is a miracle. American pilots begin noting something strange in their debriefings. German tail gunners are getting better, much better. The old tactic of diving from 6 o'clock low, once almost risk-free, now costs lives. Squadron leaders order new attack angles, oblique passes from high above or the 3 o'clock quarter. The rhythm of the air war shifts by degrees. For Karl, the missions blur together. He doesn't feel like a hero. His eyes ache from staring through glass. His hands tremble when he eats. But in his logbook, under the neat handwriting of the maintenance officer, he sees a new entry beside his name, 2 confirmed, 1 probable. Device credited for improved accuracy. He folds the page closed. For a fleeting second, he allows himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, something he built might outlive the war itself. But the thunder is drawing closer. The Allies are at the Elbe, the skies black with B-17s. Stendel's fuel dumps burn nightly. Rumours spread of evacuation orders of Russians approaching from the east, and as April dawns, the mirror in the tail faces its final flight. April 7th, 1945, Stendal Airfield. The morning is silent except for the hollow echo of boots on concrete. The once bustling base lies half abandoned. Hangar doors hang open, their roofs pocked with holes from strafing runs. The great Luftwaffe eagle painted on the control tower wall has faded, its wings now streaked with soot. The Grief bombers that remain are ghosts of their former selves, stripped of insignia, patched with mismatched metal, their propellers dull from disuse. The end is near, and everyone knows it. Karl Heinemann walks the perimeter, helmet under his arm, the chill biting through his gloves. He looks older than 23, thinner, paler, his eyes shadowed from too many nights awake. From the east, faint artillery rumbles like distant thunder. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Red Army is closing in. He stops beside his aircraft A6+FR, his faithful battered Heinkel. Mechanics are fitting, fuel drums scavenged from a wrecked transport to the wings, siphoning every last drop of aviation spirit from jerry cans. There's talk of one final mission, not an attack, but an evacuation flight westward toward the Rhine. Voss climbs aboard, clipboard in hand, his face streaked with exhaustion but still composed. He's become a relic of another era, a Luftwaffe officer, who still believes in procedure even as the Reich disintegrates around him. "We fly tonight," he says quietly. Command wants reconnaissance photos of the Wesel crossings. It's pointless, but... He glances toward the burning horizon. It's what's left. Karl nods. There's nothing else to say. 2200 hours. The night air smells of petrol and smoke. The Greif's engines roar against the darkness as the crew straps in 4 men bound together by exhaustion and fatalism. The runway ahead is cratered and uneven, but there's no choice. The mission is their last act of defiance. As the bomber lifts from the runway, Karl feels the vibration through the turret walls, a rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat. He peers through his mirrors. Behind them, Stendal burns faintly in the night flames licking at the hangars. He knows they will never see it again. The sky over central Germany is alive with ghosts, tracer fire flak bursts, and the pale glow of searchlights probing for shapes in the dark. The Greif climbs slowly, engines strained to the edge of failure. Then over the Weser radar interceptors catch them. From the west, the silhouettes of 3 P-51s emerge against the starlight, their long noses gleaming navigation lights blinking red and green. The Americans are hunting stragglers, and tonight, Karl's crew is prey. He presses his forehead against the gunsight glass, the amber reticle flickering to life. The mirrors catch movement, a Mustang diving from the blind arc between 4 and 5 o'clock. His instincts take over. 5 high. He's coming fast, he shouts through the intercom. The dorsal gunner swings his turret just in time to fire a burst. The tracers pass too low, but it's enough to throw off the American's aim. The Heinkel shudders as rounds rip through the rear fuselage, sparks shower across Karl's compartment, a hole opening above his shoulder. He steadies the gun's lines up the reticle and fires. Short, precise bursts. The tracers arc across the night, a chain of light threading through black sky. Then impact. The Mustang erupts into fire, a silent bloom of orange tumbling toward the ground below. Voss's voice crackles over the intercom. Good hit, he's gone. But there's no time to celebrate. 2 more Mustangs close in. Carl swings the turret left. His mirrors catch the gleam of one circling to flank them. The other dives head-on, guns blazing. The Henkel lurches violently. Metal shrieks. Hydraulic fluid sprays the glass. Carl's foot braces against the wall as the turret locks halfway through a rotation. He's pinned, can't traverse far enough. Turret's jammed, I can't. The words vanish in static. The second Mustang's burst rips through the fuselage. A shell punches into the starboard engine. A fireball blooms along the nacelle. We're hit, Voss shouts, feathering number 3. Carl forces the turret with raw strength, wrenching the gears back into place. Through the cracked glass of the mirrors, he sees the third fighter diving from above. The reticle jitters, then steadies. He breathes once, then pulls the triggers. A flare of orange, a scream of metal, and silence. The Mustang disintegrates mid-dive, its wing shearing off and vanishing into the clouds. The recoil throws Carl back into his seat. Smoke fills the compartment. We got him. Carl. We static swallows the voice. The intercom dies. Carl smells burning insulation, feels the tail shudder. The bomber is falling. He can see the ground rising through the mirror, a mosaic of dark forest and pale river. Bail out, someone screams faintly from the cockpit. He reaches for his chute harness, pulls the lever, nothing. The latch is jammed under twisted metal. He tries again. The turret groans as the fuselage begins to spin. Outside, the flames reflect off his own mirrors, a grotesque dance of light. For a moment he catches his own face in the reflection, pale, streaked with soot, eyes wide. He closes them. Then a jolt. A sudden crack of air. The rear glass shatters as the tail section breaks apart. He's thrown backward into the sky, the night swallowing him whole. Hours later, he awakens in a cold field parachute tangled in trees, body bruised and bleeding. The Heinkel burns in the distance, a broken torch on the horizon. Of the crew there is no sign. He stumbles toward the wreckage but collapses halfway. Dawn comes pale and merciless. Within hours an American patrol finds him lying in the frost, one eye swollen shut. His hands blackened with burns. He doesn't resist. There's nothing left to resist for. April 10th, 1945. Stendal captured. When the US Ninth Army rolls through the airfield, they find the hangars filled with strange contraptions, crude mirror assemblies bolted to gun turrets wired with salvaged fighter sights. Photographers document everything. Notes are taken, sketches drawn. The reports will later read captured Luftwaffe bombers, equipped with improvised reflector-assisted periscopic gun sights. Likely field innovation circa March 1945. In one dusty maintenance log, an American engineer spots a signature oofs. K. Heinemann unapproved Spiegel system. He circles it in pencil. The page is archived, the name forgotten. Postwar, Dresden, 1947. Karl Heinemann returns home from a Soviet labor camp thin as a ghost. His eyesight is failing from frostbite and malnutrition. The city around him is rubble, Dresden reduced to ash. He works in silence at a rail depot, never speaking of the war. To his neighbours, he's just another lost veteran. But sometimes, when sunlight catches a window pane just right, he pauses, seeing for an instant the reflection of fire in glass. He never mentions the mirrors again. 1962, Farnborough Air Show, England. A British aerospace engineer points to the tail of the Avro Lincoln bomber on display. You see that he says to an American visitor, periscopic gun sight based partly on captured German designs from '45. Ingenious, really. Ahead of its time. Somewhere in an archive in Dayton, Ohio, the original sketches still exist, labelled Field Expedient Mirror Aiming Device Origin Unknown. But one name scrawled in fading ink remains on that yellowed Luftwaffe log sheet. Unteroffizier Karl Heinemann, March 1945. Unapproved modification. History never asks for permission. The mirror in the tail lessons beyond the war. In the final chaos of 1945, when the Luftwaffe was collapsing and survival seemed impossible, a young gunner named Karl Heinemann refused to surrender to hopelessness. With no rank, no resources, and no authorization, he built a crude mirror system, that gave him and his crew a fighting chance. His invention never appeared in official manuals, never earned him a medal, and vanished almost as quietly as he lived, yet its legacy shaped future aviation. The Spiegel system was more than a clever device. It was an act of human defiance against despair. It proved that even when institutions crumble, individual ingenuity endures. Heinemann's mirrors turned scrap metal into vision literally and metaphorically. They remind us that creativity often arises not in comfort, but in desperation, when survival demands imagination. His story offers timeless lessons. First rules can preserve order, but innovation often begins where rules end. Progress depends on those willing to risk failure or punishment to solve problems no one else will. Second clarity comes from new perspectives. Karl's mirrors didn't change his weapons. They changed what he could see. In life too, breakthroughs often come when we dare to look differently at the same reality. Finally, legacy isn't measured by fame, but by influence. Heinemann never lived to see his idea refined and adopted by post-war engineers, yet his quiet courage rippled forward, a reminder that even small acts of insight can outlast empires. History remembers nations for their victories, but it advances because of individuals like him, ordinary people who, faced with impossible odds, refuse to stop thinking. The mirror he bolted to that dying aircraft still reflects something enduring, the belief that a single clear idea can illuminate even the darkest sky.